Tuesday afternoon, police say 65-year-old Jimmy Lee Dykes got onto the school bus demanding 2 children, shot and killed Poland, then kidnapped a 5-year-old named Ethan, holding him hostage in his homemade underground bunker.
Let me explain something to you about this little boy. He's a very special child. He's been through a lot. He's endured a lot. It's by the grace of God. You know, he's okay.
I said a few things. Now I know that he is having a very hard time sleeping soundly. He slings his arms and tosses and turns, and he's cried out a few times.
Dr. Phil says Ethan hasn't been back to school yet, and even the sight of a school bus seems to agitate him.
You are supposed to be thinking about your 6th birthday. Cake, toys, maybe a new little car to play with. Instead, you are sitting underground with a man the whole town feared. Above you, your mother waits for one message, that you have fallen asleep. Outside, the FBI listens through a pipe, watching for the moment when waiting becomes too dangerous. But this story does not begin in the bunker. It begins on a school bus, with one driver standing in the aisle, one child behind him, and one demand that turned an ordinary ride home into a national nightmare. On January 29, 2013, you are 5 years old, sitting near the front of a school bus in Midland City, Alabama. The school day is over. The bus is moving through the afternoon route, carrying children home the way it has so many times before. Around you, there are backpacks, small voices, shifting feet, and the ordinary noise of kids waiting to reach their driveways. Nothing about the ride feels historic. Nothing about it feels like the beginning of a national crisis. You are sitting in your usual place, close to the driver. His name is Chuck Poland. To the other children, he is the bus driver. To many parents, he is the man trusted to bring their kids home safely. But to you, sitting near the front, he is also the familiar adult who can watch over you. You like being close to him. It feels safer there. Predictable, protected. Chuck can see you, and you can see him. Then the bus slows down. Outside, near the road, a man is waiting. His name is Jimmy Lee Dykes. Chuck stops the bus. At first, it looks like a small interruption. A man by the roadside. A bus door opening. A driver pausing because someone appears to need something. In a small community, people stop. They listen. They help, but this man does not step onto the bus to ask for directions. He does not ask for a ride. He does not speak like a neighbor making conversation. He asks for children. The air inside the bus changes. The voices around you drop away. The normal noise of the ride home breaks apart into fear, silence, and confusion. Children who had been talking a moment earlier now understand that something is wrong, even if they cannot understand all of it. Dykes makes his demand.
I need 2 boys, 6 to 8 years old, 2 boys, come on.
Can't do it.
Do it.
Sorry. You're gonna have to shoot me.
I thought shoot a kid.
No.
Do it. Do it.
It's my responsibility.
I can't help that.
Kids on
That's
the
it. I
bus.
can't help
I
it.
can't turn them over to somebody else.
Here, kid. The 2 in the back seat. You, the girl, and that boy right there. Come here.
The children froze. Chuck stayed in the aisle, and Ethan was sitting just behind him. That is the image that stays. Not only a school bus, not only a stranger at the door, but one man standing in the narrow aisle between danger and the children he had promised to protect. Chuck Poland is not wearing armor. He is not surrounded by backup. He is not in a place built for emergencies. He is in the front of a yellow school bus, at the end of an ordinary school day, with children behind him and a demand in front of him. Kids on the bus are my responsibility, he says. You are close enough to hear the fear in the bus, close enough to feel the shift in every child around you, close enough to understand that Chuck is trying to keep the man away. But you are also close enough to be noticed. Near the back and middle of the bus, children begin to panic. Some duck down, some freeze in their seats. Some do not know whether to run, hide, scream, or stay completely still. Then, one student does something that matters. 16-year-old Trey Watts calls 911. On the phone, the dispatcher hears noise, crying, fear, and movement. Trey tries to explain what is happening in real time, from inside a bus where no child should ever have to make that call.
He's asking for kids. He's asking for kids? Yes, ma'am. He's aiming the gun at the bus driver? Yes, ma'am. Oh my gosh, what's going on? What's happening next? What's he doing now, honey?
By then, the bus is no longer just a bus. It is a scene of chaos. The children know they have to get out. Some manage to escape. Some run towards safety. Some make it to a nearby church. They are frightened, shaken, and carrying memories they should never have had to carry. But you do not leave with them. You are taken from the bus. One moment, you are the little boy in the seat near Chuck Poland. The next, you are being carried away from the road, away from the other children, away from the familiar yellow bus that was supposed to take you home. Behind you, the bus remains. The children who escaped are no longer laughing. The driver's seat is no longer just the place where Chuck Poland sat. And your favorite seat near the front has become the empty space everyone will remember. By the time the bus stopped moving, one seat was empty, and beneath a patch of Alabama dirt, a 6-day nightmare had already begun. Before the bus door opened on January 29, 2013, Chuck Poland believed he was dealing with a lonely man. That is what makes this part of the story so haunting. Chuck was 66 years old. He had served in the military. He was a husband, a father, and a grandfather. By the time he became a school bus driver in Dale County, Alabama, he was not just moving children from school to home. He was watching over them. He knew their faces. He knew where they sat. He knew who needed a little extra patience. To Chuck, they were not just passengers. They were his kids. And that is why the detail about Jimmy Lee Dykes matters so much. Because before Dykes became the man standing at the bus door, before the bunker, before the pipe in the ground, before the entire country learned Ethan's name, Chuck had seen him as something else. A neighbor, a loner, a man who might need a friend. Dykes lived along the bus route. People nearby had their own views of him, many of them uneasy. But Chuck was not the kind of man who started with suspicion. He seemed to start with decency. If someone appeared alone, Chuck noticed. If someone did something helpful, Chuck thanked them. In the days before the crisis, Dykes had cleared part of his property near the road, creating space where the school bus could turn around more easily. It was a small thing, but to a bus driver responsible for children, small things mattered. A safer turn, a clearer path, a moment of cooperation from a man most neighbors avoided. Chuck appreciated it. So when Dykes approached the bus before the incident and spoke with him, Chuck did not treat him like a threat. Dykes mentioned vegetables. He talked about bringing Chuck broccoli. It sounded ordinary, almost neighborly. The kind of exchange that might happen in a rural community, where people remember who helps and who waves from the road. Chuck went home and told his wife about the man. Not as a warning, not as a threat, but as someone who seemed to need kindness. That is the part that hurts. The next morning before his route, Chuck did something that tells you more about him than any title ever could. He went to Dykes' place and left fresh eggs, homemade grape jelly, and a note in his vehicle. The note said, "I am Chuck Poland, the school bus driver. Sorry I missed you. See you later." There is nothing dramatic in those words. No fear, no suspicion. Just a simple introduction from a man who believed kindness should be offered before judgment. Chuck was not trying to be a hero that morning. He was not trying to make history. He was doing what came naturally to him. He saw a man who seemed isolated, and he reached out. He did not know that the man he was trying to befriend had already built something underground. He did not know that beneath the surface, there was a plan no act of kindness could stop. And that is what makes the story so painful. Because when Jimmy Lee Dykes stepped onto Chuck's bus later that afternoon, he was not a total stranger to him. Chuck had spoken with him. Chuck had thanked him. Chuck had left food and a note for him. Chuck had treated him like a person. But Dykes did not come to return that kindness. He came to take children. In that moment, Chuck's decency met Dykes' plan, and Chuck still did not step aside. This is important to understand. Chuck Poland was not careless because he opened the bus door. He was not weak because he believed a lonely man might deserve compassion. He was not naive because he had tried to be kind. He was human. He was decent. He was the kind of person who saw a man alone and thought, maybe he needs a friend. And in a world where suspicion often feels safer than kindness, Chuck chose kindness anyway. That choice did not cause the tragedy. The responsibility belonged to the man who arrived with a demand and a plan. But Chuck's kindness makes the tragedy heavier because it shows the contrast between two men standing at the same door. One man had brought eggs, jelly, and a note. The other had come for children. One man believed the kids on that bus were his responsibility. The other saw them as a way to force the world to listen. And when the bus door opened, those two truths collided. Chuck Poland opened the door because kindness was normal to him. But the man outside had come with a plan. After Ethan was taken from the school bus, the road behind him did not lead to a house. It led to the ground. Jimmy Lee Dykes made a call to 911 and told authorities where he was. He said he had a child. He said he was underground. And when police arrived at the address, they were not facing a normal rescue scene. There was no front door to approach, no hallway to enter, no window to break, no room where officers could look inside and understand what they were dealing with. There was only dirt, a hidden hatch, and a white PVC pipe sticking up from the ground. That pipe became the first connection between Ethan and the world above him. It was not wide. It was not comforting. It was not built for hope, but for the officers standing over that patch of Alabama earth, it was the only way to speak to the man below. Dykes told them they would have to communicate through it. He was not coming out. He was not handing Ethan over, and if anyone tried to rush in, he warned them there would be terrible consequences. The first words from law enforcement were direct: "Come out of your shelter." But Dykes stayed below. "We are not going away." Still, there was no movement from the hatch, and that is when the case changed. This was no longer just a child taken from a school bus. It was now an underground standoff, a tactical crisis. A place where one wrong move could cost the very life everyone was trying to save. The FBI was called in, and from the moment they arrived, they understood something chilling. The bunker was not an accident. This was not a shallow hiding place, dug in panic. This was not a temporary shelter where a desperate man had run with no plan. The bunker had a hatch. It had a breathing system. It had supplies. It had a television. It had a pull-eyes. It had a television. It had a pull-eyes. That detail mattered. Because preparation means time. Preparation means thought. Preparation means Jimmy Lee Dykes had imagined something before the day he stepped onto that bus. Above ground, investigators saw only fragments: a pipe, a hatch, dirt, a few clues scattered around a property. But below ground, Ethan was inside a small underground space with a man whose motives were still unclear. Officers could not see the full room. They could not simply storm in. They could not treat it like a house or a vehicle or a normal barricade situation. Everything about that bunker gave Dykes control. He controlled the hatch. He controlled the distance. He controlled whether Ethan could be heard. And at first, he controlled the only line of communication, that PVC pipe. Think about that image for a moment. A 5-year-old boy, taken from the seat behind his bus driver, now somewhere beneath the ground. His mother above him, unable to touch him. His classmates away from the bus, trying to understand what they had just escaped. And the only thing connecting everyone to Ethan was a pipe rising out of the dirt. If you are watching this story for the first time, pause here and ask yourself, how do you rescue a child when the only door is a trapdoor? The only voice comes through a pipe, and the man inside has already shown he will not act like a reasonable person. This is why negotiators had to move carefully. Every word mattered. Every delay mattered. Every sound from below mattered. They needed to keep Dykes talking. They needed to learn the layout. They needed to know whether Ethan was okay, and they needed to buy time without making Dykes feel cornered too quickly. That is the cruel balance of a case like this. Move too fast, and you risk everything. Move too slowly, and the person underground may grow more unstable. So the FBI had to turn patience into a weapon. They had to listen through a pipe. They had to study the hatch. They had to understand a bunker, built by a man who seemed to want the world to hear him, but only on his terms. And while they worked, Ethan waited below. Before we go deeper into what Dykes may have been planning, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stories like this are not just about the crime itself. They are about the small decisions, the missed warnings, and the brave people who stood between a child and something far worse. And if this case already feels different to you, comment below. Do you think this bunker was built for this exact moment, or did Dykes create it for one purpose and later turn it into something else? Because that question matters. The bunker was not just a hiding place. It was evidence. It showed planning. It showed control. It showed that Ethan had not simply been pulled into a random shelter. He had been taken into a space designed to isolate, delay, and force the outside world into Dykes' rules. Above ground, the world saw a pipe. Below ground, Ethan was inside a box built for a plan no one fully understood. The first theory is the one that fits the evidence most cleanly. Jimmy Lee Dykes did not simply snap in a single moment. What happened on that school bus may have erupted in minutes, but the structure behind it had been forming long before Ethan was taken. The bunker itself tells us that. This was not a random hole in the ground. It had a hatch, it had ventilation, it had supplies, it had food, water, a television, sleeping space, and enough preparation to keep someone below ground for more than a few hours. It was not comfortable, but it was functional. And that matters because a place like that is not built by accident. It is built with time, thought, and a purpose. Then there was the note. Before Dykes took Ethan, he handed Chuck Poland a message that made his demand clear. He wanted 2 boys. He wanted them selected. And within that note was the phrase that may explain the whole crisis: "I have a story to tell." Those words are important because they point away from a simple escape plan. They point away from money. They point away from a sudden act with no larger goal. Dykes was not asking for cash. He was not demanding a vehicle. He was not trying to vanish into another state. Instead, he seemed to want attention. He wanted an audience. He wanted the world to stop, listen, and make room for the story he believed he needed to tell. That changes how we look at the bunker. It was not only a hiding place. It may have been a stage. Later, when negotiators spoke with him, that idea became even stronger. Dykes reportedly wanted a female reporter and a camera. He wanted to broadcast his message. He wanted someone to come into the bunker so he could speak on his terms from the space he controlled, while the country watched. In his mind, Ethan may not have been the final target. Ethan may have been the pressure point. A child underground made everyone listen. A child underground made police wait. A child underground made news cameras gather. And that may have been the purpose all along: to turn one small patch of Alabama dirt into the center of the national conversation. I have a story to tell. Send a reporter. I want to tell my story. Those are not the words of a man focused on ransom. Those are not the words of a man focused on ransom. They are the words of someone who believed his message mattered more than the life he had placed at risk. The logic is hard to ignore. If Dykes only wanted to hide, he did not need to board a school bus. He already had a bunker. If he wanted money, he would have made a clear financial demand. If this had been purely impulsive, the bunker, the note, the ventilation pipe, the supplies, and the later request for media would not align so neatly. But they do align. They create a pattern. First, he built the underground space. Then he prepared a way to breathe and communicate. Then he approached the bus. Then he demanded children. Then he retreated into the bunker. Then he tried to force the outside world to negotiate with him through a pipe in the ground. Every step gave him control over the next one. That does not mean every detail went exactly as he imagined. Plans like this can change in seconds. He asked for 2 boys, but left with 1. He may have expected Chuck Poland to obey. He may have expected the children to move faster. He may have expected fear to make everyone cooperate. But Chuck refused. The children froze. The bus became chaotic, and in that chaos, Ethan became the child Dykes took underground. Still, the larger design remained clear. Dykes needed a hostage because without one, no one would have listened. Without Ethan, the bunker was only a hidden room. With Ethan inside it, the bunker became leverage. That is what makes this theory so disturbing. It suggests that Ethan was pulled into someone else's private war with the world. A 5-year-old boy became the tool a bitter man used to demand attention. The school bus became the doorway into a crisis that had likely been imagined long before the door ever opened. And Chuck Poland, the man who had tried to treat Dykes with kindness, became the person standing between that plan and the children it required. So the strongest theory is this: Dykes had prepared more than a shelter. He had prepared a scene. The bunker was his stage. The pipe was his microphone. The note was his opening line, and Ethan was the pressure that forced everyone to watch. Dykes had built a world underground, and he needed a child to make the world above look down. But if Dykes had built a world underground, that does not automatically mean Ethan had been chosen before the bus door opened. That is where the second theory begins. The bunker may have been prepared. The note may have been prepared. The note may have been prepared. The demand may have been prepared. But Ethan himself may not have been the planned target. He may have been the nearest child in the worst possible seat, at the worst possible second. This theory matters because it separates two things that are easy to mix together. 1. Dykes appeared to have a larger plan. 2. The specific child taken from the bus may have been chosen in the chaos of the moment. The note reportedly asked for 2 boys, between 6 and 8 years old. That detail is important. Ethan was 5. He did not match the age range Dykes had written down. And there is no clear sign that Dykes stepped onto that bus asking for Ethan by name. He did not appear to say, "I want that child." He asked for children in a category. 2 boys, a certain age, a certain type. In his mind, they may have been part of the plan, but not necessarily individuals he had already identified. Then look at where Ethan was sitting. He was near the front, close to Chuck Poland, right behind the driver. For Ethan, that seat had probably always felt safer. Chuck could watch over him. Ethan could stay near a familiar adult on an ordinary afternoon. It was the best place for a little boy who needed extra care and structure. But on January 29th, that same seat placed him closest to the man who had stepped onto the bus. That is the terrible irony. The seat meant to keep Ethan safe may have made him visible. When Dykes demanded children, Chuck Poland refused. He stood his ground. He stayed in the aisle. He did not hand over the students. The children behind him froze, ducked, and panicked. No one moved forward willingly. No child rose from a seat and walked toward Dykes. The plan, if there was one, began to fail right there in the narrow aisle of the bus. Dykes wanted control, but Chuck blocked him. Dykes wanted 2 children, but the children did not come. Dykes wanted obedience, but the driver said no. And in those seconds, Ethan was right there. This is why the second theory is so logical. Ethan may not have been selected days before. He may have been selected because he was the easiest child for Dykes to reach once the original demand collapsed. He was small, he was near the front, he was close to the driver's area, and when Dykes could not get what he had demanded, he took the child closest to him. That does not make the act random in a simple way. The larger situation was not random. The bunker was not random. The note was not random. The demand for children was not random. But Ethan's place inside that plan may have been accidental. A planned crisis can still contain an unplanned victim. That is what makes this theory so painful. If Ethan had sat 3 rows farther back, would Dykes have reached someone else? If Chuck had not blocked the aisle, would more children have been taken? If the other students had moved when Dykes demanded it, would the outcome have been different? These are impossible questions, and they do not change what happened, but they show how fragile the moment was. A few feet, a few seconds, 1 seat. That may have been the difference between Ethan going home and Ethan disappearing beneath the ground. This theory also helps explain why Chuck Poland's actions were so important. By refusing, he disrupted the plan. By standing in the aisle, he limited what Dykes could do. By forcing Dykes to act under pressure, he may have prevented more children from being taken. The tragedy is that Ethan was still close enough to be pulled into it. But the fact that only one child was taken may be because Chuck held the line long enough for the others to escape. So in part 4, the strongest theory was that Dykes had prepared a stage beneath the ground. In part 5, the strongest question is whether Ethan was ever meant to be the central figure on that stage. The answer may be no. Ethan may have become the face of the crisis, not because Dykes had studied him, followed him, or chosen him in advance, but because Ethan sat in the seat behind the driver, the same seat where Chuck could protect him, the same seat that placed him closest to danger when the bus door opened. And that is the horror of this theory. Sometimes a child is not chosen because of who he is. Sometimes he is chosen because of who he is. Sometimes he is chosen because of where he is. Ethan may not have been chosen days before. He may have been chosen in seconds, and sometimes seconds are enough to change a life. For 6 days, the world above the ground had to learn how to wait. That may sound simple, but in Ethan's case, waiting was not passive. Waiting meant listening through a pipe. Waiting meant watching a hatch. Waiting meant sending down small items and reading every reaction like a warning sign. Waiting meant trying to keep one man calm while a 5-year-old boy sat underground, far from his mother, far from his mother, far from his bus, far from everything familiar. On the first day, the most important fact was also the most terrifying. Ethan was alive, but he was below ground. Law enforcement knew where he had been taken, but knowing the location did not mean they had control. The bunker was small, hidden, and difficult to enter. The only clear connection to the outside world was the pipe rising from the dirt. Through it, negotiators could speak to Dykes. Through it, they could sometimes hear what was happening below. And through it, Ethan's family had to hope that every passing hour meant their little boy was still safe enough to be reached. By the second day, the FBI understood that the smallest objects might become the most important tools. Ethan needed his medicine. He also needed comfort. So they worked to send down things a child could understand. Coloring books, crayons, snacks, and toys. A toy car, a toy dinosaur, Cheez-Its, medicine. Ordinary things, tiny things. The kind of things that would never matter in a normal investigation, but in this one, they mattered deeply. For Ethan, they were pieces of childhood dropped into a place that had taken childhood away from him. For the FBI, they were also openings, brief moments when the hatch might move, when Dykes might reach out, when agents could observe how the entrance worked, how he accepted deliveries, how careful he was, and whether the situation was becoming more dangerous. Every small delivery had 2 purposes. One was emotional. The other was tactical. A coloring book might calm Ethan. A snack might keep him steady. A toy car might give him something to focus on, besides the walls around him. But each item also gave investigators a little more information. How long did Dykes take to open the hatch? Did he stay near it? Did he expose his hands? Did he speak calmly, or did his tone change? Did Ethan sound tired, frightened, confused, or restless? Nothing was too small to matter now. By the 3rd day, even the media became part of the strategy. Dykes had a television inside the bunker, which meant he could hear how the outside world was describing him. That created a new risk. If he felt mocked, cornered, or painted as a monster with no way out, he might turn that anger toward the situation below ground. So law enforcement and local voices had to speak carefully. Messages were shaped, not only for the public, but for the man watching from inside the bunker. Keeping him calm became part of keeping Ethan alive. Meanwhile, Ethan's family was trapped in a different kind of bunker. Waiting rooms, phone updates, whispered prayers, and the unbearable distance between a mother and her child. Ethan loved to be hugged. He loved being tucked in. But his mother could not reach him. She could not hold him, could not calm him with her own voice, could not tell him in person that he was going to come home. All she could do was wait for updates. At night, one message mattered more than almost anything.
Around 9 o'clock at night. So they would at least be able to tell you he's gone to bed for the night?
Yes. We normally get a text or something that he had fallen asleep.
Was that at least some comfort?
That was actually a lot of comfort, where I could actually go lay my head down.
That comfort was fragile, but it was real. If Ethan had fallen asleep, then for that moment he was still there, still breathing, still reachable. Still a little boy who could close his eyes, even in a place no child should ever have been. By the fourth day, the FBI was no longer only negotiating, they were preparing. A mock version of the bunker was built so a rescue team could rehearse. They studied the hatch, the shaft, the angle of entry, and the narrow space below. They needed a plan that could work in seconds, because once a rescue began, there would be no time for hesitation. The bunker had given Dykes control, so the FBI had to create control of their own before they ever went in. By days 5 and 6, the balance began to change. The calm moments became less reassuring. Dykes' behavior grew more unstable. The clock felt louder. What had started as a negotiation was moving toward a decision no one wanted to make, but everyone feared might become necessary. For Ethan, they were toys. For the FBI, they were seconds of access. For his mother, they were proof that her son was still there. By the 6th day, Ethan was only a few days away from his 6th birthday. That detail made the waiting feel even heavier. Somewhere above ground, there should have been talk of cake, gifts, candles, and a little boy turning 1 year older. Instead, his family was waiting for updates from a command center. His mother was waiting for any sign that he was still calm, still safe, still reachable. And below the ground, Ethan remained inside the bunker with Jimmy Lee Dykes. For nearly a week, the FBI had tried to keep the situation from breaking apart. They had negotiated. They had listened. They had sent down medicine, toys, coloring books, snacks, and small comforts. They had studied the hatch. They had built a mock version of the bunker. They had rehearsed possible ways in. Every hour had been used to learn more, slow Dykes down, and keep Ethan alive. But then the pattern began to change. Dykes was not becoming calmer. He was not moving closer to surrender. He was not showing signs that he planned to release Ethan. Instead, the FBI could hear and observe a man becoming more unstable, more impatient, and more attached to the plan he had created in his mind. That was the turning point. Negotiation works only as long as time is helping. It works when every hour creates more trust, more information, more opportunity, or more distance from danger. But in this case, the FBI began to believe the opposite was happening. Time was no longer protecting Ethan. Time was giving Dykes more space to spiral. The assessment became brutally clear. It's not going to get any better. It's getting worse. Those two sentences explain why the case had to shift. They were not said lightly. No one wanted to force an ending inside a bunker. No one wanted to make a decision that could not be undone. But the longer agents watched and listened, the more they believed Ethan was in immediate danger. If they waited too long, they might lose the only chance they had. That is one of the hardest truths in hostage negotiations. Sometimes, patience saves a life. Sometimes waiting becomes the risk. And by this point, the FBI had done almost everything waiting could do. They had kept Dykes talking. They had used the media carefully to avoid provoking him. They had comforted Ethan with small, familiar things. They had tracked Dykes' habits. They had studied how he moved near the hatch. They had practiced on a model of the bunker, so they would not enter blindly. They had prepared for the moment when words would no longer be enough. If you have followed this story from the beginning, you can see how each small detail now connects. The pipe in the ground, the toys sent below, the mock bunker, the waiting mother, the birthday that was getting closer, and the man underground who kept moving further from surrender. That is why stories like this matter. They are not only about what happened, they are about how investigators read pressure, timing, behavior, and risk. If you want more survivor-centered, true crime stories told with care and respect, make sure you subscribe to the channel before we continue, because what happened next was not sudden from the FBI's point of view. It was the result of 6 days of watching the situation narrow. The rescue team had already rehearsed. They understood that the hatch was the key point. They knew Dykes had to be close enough to the entrance for them to act. They also knew Ethan had to be far enough from the danger zone for the plan to have a chance. So they waited for a moment, not a perfect moment, not a perfect moment, There was no perfect moment underground, only the least impossible one. When Dykes moved near the hatch, the team acted. The entry was fast, loud, and dangerous. But the details do not need to be repeated in graphic form. What matters is this. The FBI had reached the point where negotiation was no longer making Ethan safer. They had to move before the situation closed around him completely. For several minutes, no one above ground could truly know the outcome. Those minutes must have felt endless. Then came the sound everyone had been waiting for. Not applause, not celebration, not a clean announcement that everything was over. A child crying. And in that moment, crying was the best sound in the world. Because crying meant Ethan was breathing. Crying meant he had survived the bunker. Crying meant the little boy who had vanished from the seat behind the driver was finally coming back into the light. The first sound they needed was not a victory shout, it was a child crying, because crying meant breathing. And breathing meant Ethan was alive. When Ethan came out of the bunker, the world above ground finally exhaled. For 6 days, everyone had been waiting for a sign. His mother had waited for messages. His family had waited for phone calls. Investigators had waited for the right moment. A small town had waited with its breath held, hoping that the boy taken from the school bus would one day step back into the light. And then he did. Ethan was brought out alive. He was taken for medical care, checked by doctors, and treated with the kind of careful attention given to a child who had been through something no child should ever have to understand. Physically, he had survived. That was the first miracle. The deeper questions, what he had seen, what he remembered, how the bunker would follow him, would come later. In that first moment, the only thing that mattered was simple. Ethan was out. Ethan was alive. Ethan was going home. For his family, the news came like a wave after 6 days of fear. His mother had not been able to hold him while he was underground. She had not been able to tuck him in. She had not been able to tuck him in. She had not been able to comfort him when he was scared or tired or confused. For nearly a week, the closest thing she had to peace was a message saying he had fallen asleep for the night. Now there was no pipe between them, no hatch, no dirt, no command center update, replacing the sound of his voice. She could finally hold her son again. That is the image that matters most after the rescue. Not the bunker, not the law enforcement vehicles, not the cameras, not the headlines, just a mother and her child, reunited after nearly a week of waiting for the worst and praying for the impossible. Only days earlier, no one knew if Ethan would make it to his 6th birthday. That birthday had been hanging over the entire crisis like a quiet heartbreak. A 5-year-old boy was supposed to be thinking about cake, presents, toy cars, and being 1 year older. Instead, he had spent the final days before turning 6 underground. His family had been forced to wonder whether there would even be a birthday party at all. But there was. Ethan turned 6, and the party happened. It was not just a celebration. It was proof. Proof that the boy from the bunker was still a child. Proof that the story did not end under the ground. Proof that after 6 days of fear, there could still be candles, toys, family, and laughter. The images that came after the rescue were simple but powerful. Ethan smiling, Ethan playing, Ethan surrounded by people who had prayed for him, searched for answers, and waited for him to come home. He was given toys, he played with cars, he went to Toys R Us. These were ordinary things. But after the bunker, ordinary became precious. His family wanted America to see him smile. That detail says so much. They did not want the country to remember only the fear. They did not want Ethan frozen forever, as the little boy beneath the ground. They wanted people to see that his smile had returned. Not because everything was suddenly easy, not because the trauma had disappeared, but because Ethan was more than what had happened to him. This was not a simple happy ending. A happy ending would mean the bus ride was never interrupted. It would mean Chuck Poland drove every child home. It would mean Ethan never saw the hatch, never heard the voices through the pipe, never waited underground for strangers to decide the safest way to reach him. That ending was gone. What Ethan received instead was a second beginning, a chance to be held again. A chance to open presents. A chance to play with toy cars instead of being defined by the place he had been taken. A chance to turn 6. And for the town, that birthday party was more than a party. It was the moment everyone finally breathed out. For almost a week, Midland City had been known for the bunker. Now, for one afternoon, it could be known for a little boy's birthday. The birthday party did not erase the bunker, but it gave Ethan back one thing the bunker tried to steal: childhood. To understand why Ethan was the only child taken from that bus, you have to return to the aisle. Not the bunker, not the pipe in the ground, not the command center where the FBI studied every sound from below. You have to go back to the front of the school bus, where Chuck Poland stood between Jimmy Lee Dykes and the children behind him. Chuck was 66 years old. He was not armed. He was not surrounded by officers. He did not have time to wait for help. He had only a few seconds to decide what kind of man he would be in the most dangerous moment of his life. And in those seconds, he did not move aside. That is the moral center of this story. Chuck Poland was not a detective, not a negotiator, not a tactical expert. He was a school bus driver. But on that afternoon, his job became something much larger than driving a route. He became the line that Dykes had to cross to reach the children. When Dykes demanded boys from the bus, Chuck refused. When the pressure increased, Chuck still refused. When the children froze behind him, Chuck stayed in the aisle. He did not run. He did not surrender the students. He did not treat them like strangers who happened to be riding behind him. To Chuck, they were his responsibility. They were, in his own way, his kids. That single belief may have changed everything. If Chuck had stepped back, Dykes may have moved deeper into the bus. If Chuck had obeyed, more children may have been taken. If Chuck had not delayed him, the other students may not have had the same chance to escape. And if Chuck had not stood directly in the path, Ethan may not have been the only child pulled into the crisis. That is why Chuck cannot be treated as a side character in Ethan's story. He is one of the reasons there were not more empty seats. He is one of the reasons the other children survived the afternoon and ran towards safety. He is one of the reasons the tragedy, as terrible as it was, did not become even larger. There is a quiet kind of courage that does not look dramatic until everything is over. It does not announce itself. It does not make speeches. It simply stands where it must stand. Chuck Poland's courage was like that. He did not know cameras would later study the bus. He did not know reporters would repeat his name. He did not know a road would one day carry his memory. He only knew that a man was asking for children, and that answer had to be no. Later, the community would remember him as a hero. A stretch of road would be named in his honor. Families, officers, and officials would speak of what he did that day, because everyone understood the same thing. Chuck Poland held the line when the children could not protect themselves. But the most powerful tribute may not be a road sign or a memorial. It may be the simple fact that so many children went home because he did not step aside. Ethan's survival is the heart of this case, but Chuck's sacrifice is the backbone of it. One tells us what was saved, the other tells us what it cost. The story remembers Ethan as the boy in the bunker, but it must also remember Chuck Poland as the man who stood between a stranger and a bus full of children. It began with a seat near the driver, a small seat near the front of a school bus, on an ordinary afternoon in Midland City, Alabama, a place where a 5-year-old boy felt safe because Chuck Poland could see him, and because Ethan could see Chuck. It began with the normal rhythm of a ride home after school, with children waiting for their stops, with backpacks on the floor, with the kind of ordinary noise no one ever thinks to remember. Then the door opened, a man stepped onto the bus, and everything ordinary vanished. Chuck Poland stood in the aisle. He had no weapon, no backup, no time to prepare. But he had a responsibility, and he understood it in the clearest way possible. The children on that bus were his to protect. He stayed in place. He said no. And because he said no, many children had the chance to run. But Ethan was still taken. From the seat behind the driver, he disappeared into a story no child should ever have to survive. He was carried away from the bus, away from the road, away from the people who had just been sitting beside him. Then came the hatch, the dirt, the hidden space underground, and above it all, a white PVC pipe rising from the ground, like the only thin line between Ethan and the world that was trying to bring him back. For 6 days, that pipe mattered. Through it, voices traveled down. Through it, negotiators tried to keep Dykes talking. Through it, the outside world learned just enough to hope. And while the FBI listened, watched, and planned, small things became powerful. A toy car, a toy dinosaur, coloring books, snacks, medicine. To Ethan, they were comfort. To investigators, they were seconds of access. To his family, they were signs that he was still there. And every night, one message carried more weight than almost anything else. He has fallen asleep. For Ethan's mother, those words were not small. They meant her son had made it through another day. They meant that somewhere beneath the ground, the little boy who loved to be hugged had closed his eyes. They meant there was still time, still a chance, still a chance, still hope. Then came the moment when waiting was no longer enough. The FBI had to read what the public could not see. They had to understand when time had stopped helping and had started becoming dangerous. They had to act, not because the situation was simple, but because it was running out of safe options. And after those final minutes inside the bunker, the call came. Ethan was alive. The boy from the seat behind the driver had been brought back into the light. Then came the 6th birthday. That birthday did not erase what happened. It could not. No cake, no presents, no toy cars, no trip to Toys R Us could undo the bus, the bunker, the pipe, or the fear. But the birthday mattered because it gave Ethan something the bunker had tried to take away from him. It gave him a piece of childhood back, a smile, a celebration, a room full of people who had waited, prayed, and hoped to see him reach that day. And Ethan kept going. In the years that followed, he was adopted by the Turner family. He grew up. He found peace in hands-on work, in painting, in building and welding, in nature, and in looking toward a future that belonged to him. In 2026, Ethan Turner graduated high school. By then, the world still remembered him as the boy in the bunker, but Ethan wanted something more than that label. He wanted people to see the person who came after the headline. That is the lesson this story leaves behind. A school bus driver can be the final line between safety and disaster. A negotiation is not only about waiting, it is about knowing when waiting has become too dangerous. And a child who survives should never be locked forever inside the worst day of his life. So when we remember this case, we should remember the seat. We should remember the pipe. We should remember the birthday. We should remember the mother waiting for the message that her son had fallen asleep. And we should remember Chuck Poland, the man who stood in the aisle when standing there mattered most. If Ethan's story stayed with you, subscribe for more survivor-centered true crime documentaries told with care, respect, and humanity. And tell me in the comments what part of this case stayed with you the most. Chuck's courage, Ethan's survival, or the moment the whole town finally got to breathe again. He was once known as the boy in the bunker. But today, the better word is survivor.